introduce to you our speaker tonight. We have Chad Thomason here. He is our Beckman math teacher and girls basketball coach, correct?
Correct.
And what?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Chad. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay if I just talk like this? Is this too loud, Tony, for you? Perfect. Can everybody hear me okay if I just use this instead of the microphone? Okay, I'm used to yelling at high school girls at basketball practice, so it should be fine. First off, I want to thank Casey McCarher for inviting me to speak today. I think that's the first time I've got their last name correct. It's nice to see a former student in such a role that you have right now. I knew it'd come back to bite me in some way. Tonight's proof of that. Thank you everyone else for coming tonight too. I can't believe there wasn't a better option for a Thursday night, but thank you for coming. A little bit about me. I'm a math teacher at Beckman Catholic High School. I'm also the head girls basketball coach. My wife Emmy grew up in Epworth area, is also a teacher at Beckman. We have 4 children, 6 and under, Ruby, Phineas, Thea, and Abel. My family and I live in Earlville and go to church in Earlville. I really like sports, especially the Oregon Ducks. We teach our kids to make the O so that they can cheer for the Ducks on Sundays after they score touchdowns. I like to make bets with my students in class, usually on sports, but they're always Dr. Pepper bets. I like to say that Dr. Pepper is God's nectar. I'm also an avid Star Wars fan. Can you get any more dorky than Star Wars and mathematics? I want to make a point to tell you that I'm not Catholic. I'm not here to blow your minds tonight. I just want to share with you where I am in my faith journey. Mostly the people I've met and how their talents from God have shaped me into who I am today. When I'm done, hopefully you'll know me a little bit better, which may be a good thing or a bad thing. I guess we'll find out. As I go through my story, I'm sure you'll notice that God has always tried to be a part of my life. You'll probably see the signs even better than I did. His path has led me, the path that he's led me on has been incredible and almost unbelievable, but I know this was his plan. That is the only way to describe it. I will lead you through a number of different tangents in my life, and I will even let you hear what it's like to be in our locker room before a basketball game. So buckle up, here we go. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in a small town in the state of Oregon. We were a rural community just like Beckman, but religion wasn't a very big part of our community. I didn't go to church. I believed in God, but I didn't have a relationship with him. Sports were my thing, especially basketball. In high school, I played basketball at lunch instead of eating. Sorry, Mom, I don't think you know that I didn't eat my lunch. I gave my lunch to my best friend, Adam, who was struggling with money. This led to the first sign of God that the guy that opened the gym for us was, I always called the basketball dude. He was a youth group leader. He literally told me that he saw fire inside of me to become something more. Talk about a sign from God. He always tried to get me to go to youth group and conferences, but I told him it wasn't for me. My parents were the examples of Christ that I came to know. What I strive for today is an example of those around me. From my dad, I learned about hard work. He was a logger. Have any of you guys seen the show Axemen or heard of it? That was my dad. He started his job when he was 18 and worked till he was around 62. The only reason he had to stop was because his body wouldn't allow him to do it anymore. I can't remember him missing a day for being sick. There was days where his back hurt so bad that Mom had to tie his shoes for him, his boots, so he could go to work. He was also the first coach I can remember. The rule I got from my dad is, and try to install in my teams, is to be punctual. We don't allow our girls to be late for practice. I remember in 4th grade, he was our coach, and we got to practice. I put my shoes on. He said, "Thomason, get on the line." And I said, "For what?" "You were late." And I said, "You drove me." And he said, "I don't care, get on the line." And I ran. And I still, to this day, remember how mad I was, but now that I'm a coach, I can see the message that he was trying to send to me. From my mom, I learned compassion. She's the most compassionate person I've ever met. She drove me everywhere for sports: fall soccer, winter basketball, spring baseball, track, and even summer tennis. She never complained of it, always was willing to get me everywhere. One story that sticks in my mind is my mom, when I was in college, one of my high school friends stopped by my mom's work and asked for money because he was struggling. Without even thinking about it, she wrote a check and gave it to him. My mom honestly shows compassion in everything she does, and that's just one example. Both my parents moved here to Iowa about 4 years ago. She finally found a job that she loves. She works at the elementary school in Earlville and loves being around the kids there. which is perfect for her since she can show her compassion with them. Thank you. She was telling me about her terrible, terrible hard day today. She got to go to the pumpkin patch with the elementary school kids and ride on the hay bales, and then she had to come back and watch a classroom of 4 take a nap. And she gets to do the same thing tomorrow, so she's very, not looking forward to work tomorrow. Yeah. We are so thankful for them to be here, but let me tell you, there's a big difference between being a parent and a grandparent. The things that my kids get away with at their house would never have been acceptable in the house growing up. My dad was very strict about putting elbows on the table and holding our chins up. We got one warning, and then after that, he took our chair away and we had to eat standing up. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat at a table while you were standing up. It's not very easy. My mom, I try to do the same things with my kids and put the elbows on the tables at their house. He says, lighten up, they're fine. My mom, never have I seen so many snacks in a house before. M&Ms, candy, anything the kids want. And it's like she always has some in her back pocket just in case one needs one at any moment. The sacrifice of them leaving their life in Oregon to come here means the world to us. We are so thankful that God brought them here to Iowa, but let's be honest, it probably had a little to do with the grandchildren also. The last person I want to talk about from Oregon is my grandma Ruby. Excuse me. From her, I learned competitiveness. She was something else. One thing I had to realize about her was she was about 4'8" on a good day. But she was one tough mother. She didn't have a problem knocking me over trying to get to a soccer ball or arguing with the car dealership, charging her 53 cents over her quote. And I was there when that happened. One story that sticks out of my head is we were in 8th grade playing soccer, and we beat a team Cottage Grove 3-0. And after the game, we went up to my grandma, and we're about the same height in 8th grade. And excuse my language, but I asked her how we played, and she said, "You guys played like shit." And all these 8th grade parents are like covering their kids' ears. And she looked at everybody and said, "Well, I'm not going to lie to the kid." And so after that, we played the same team about 2 weeks later, and we beat them 12-0. And so I went up to her after that, "How did we play, Grandma?" And she said, "I told you guys could play better. I knew it." And a couple of parents threatened to keep her in the car, but they'd keep the window cracked a little bit so she could breathe. My senior year of high school, God put another influential person in my life, Trey Griggs. My senior year, we got a new basketball coach, and this brought a brand new coaching staff. Trey was hired as the JV coach. He was from Raytown, Missouri, and moved to Oregon to help his sister and brother-in-law start a church. He was teaching celibacy and natural family planning classes at our high school. He went to a small college in Liberty, Missouri called William Jewell College. He says he was more joking than being serious, but he got me to visit Jewell in spring break of my senior year. I fell in love with campus, and it was the only place I applied to college. Thank God I was accepted. The incredible part was that Trey moved back to Missouri after this one school year. What are the chances that he would move to Oregon for 1 year and be put at our rural high school? There's God again. I moved to Liberty in July, was working camps in the summer, and started playing with the basketball team. There was a lot of downtime. I was living in the dorms. Trey was our RD, but I was living for free, but the housing department was trying to find me, so I had to switch rooms almost daily. I was extremely homesick. I didn't really know anyone within a 2,000-mile radius, and I thought about quitting and moving home and forgetting about the college thing. But God intervened when I went to church with Trey. I went to church with him in Grandview, which is about 45 minutes away, and the pastor was talking about Jesus' trials and how it was so hard, but Jesus knew it was the right thing because it was difficult, and that if it was easy, everybody would do it. And I knew that spoke right to me and that I was where I needed to be. After the sermon, I went up to the priest and told him what it meant to me and what I was going through, and he kind of laughed and said, "All week I've been preparing for a different sermon, but yesterday God told me I needed to speak about this today." So that was God going through that with us. This is probably one of the most important lessons that God has ever taught me. Life is hard. It's full of storms. A quote that has always stuck with me, one thing about storms, either you're in a storm, just coming out of a storm, or soon enough, you'll be headed into another storm. A motivational speech I give to my basketball girls is about palm trees. Storms can produce a wind that is so strong that palm trees bend, and bend, but never break. They always bounce back. Actually, the roots of the tree get stronger every time it must bend from the pressure of the storm. As we go through life, we need to make sure we are bending with our storms, but we must realize that God is there to keep us from breaking. This is harder to do than I thought it was going to be.
You're doing good.
Thank you. All right, let's get back on track. Trey decided it was time for me to stop hiding in the dorms, and so I moved in with one of my college teammates. At a youth conference, I accepted God into my heart and was saved. I knew God wanted me at Jewel. That was clear. I played basketball for 2 years, but our coach didn't let juniors play JV. Our team went into the national tournament ranked number 1 in the nation, and our only senior was Pierre Jallo, who was 6'8", from Gambia. So now that you see me, I don't fit into that role to fill that spot. So I met with the head coach, and he asked me to be a manager, and I accepted. That wasn't very long-lived. I told our girls basketball coach at Jewel that if she ever needed help, I'd go with her to take stats if she needed help. Our coach went to Maine, and I drew the short straw and had to stay home. So Coach Kress asked me if I would go with the girls program to take stats for them. On the way there, she asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And she said, what do you want to coach? And I said, well, basketball would be my first, but I'd also coach soccer if it was available. And she said, would you ever coach girls? And I said, absolutely not. No way. I'm not dealing with the drama. I don't want any part of that mess. So that was on the first day. It was a 2-day tournament. On the way back, the second day, she asked to meet in my office, in her office, and she offered me a student assistant job with the girls program, and I accepted. So in 2 days, she switched my mind about coaching girls, and I've been doing it ever since. So that was 2004, so that's a long time. Math's over for the day, so you can do the math later if you want. Coach Kress taught me all about integrity. She obviously is the girls basketball coach at Jewel and really turned that program around. She is the ideal coach, and her morals are something I always want to imitate. What I learned from her goes way beyond the court. She's a firm believer in the student athlete and always told our girls to put school before basketball. One time, one of our best players asked to miss practice for a science lab. That would help her grade, and our coach said that she could. But after practice, Coach Kress just felt like there was something nagging at her, so she called the science teacher and asked how the lab went, and she said that there wasn't a lab that day, so our player had lied to us. So when we played one of our biggest rivals, our second leading scorer had to sit out because she lied to our team, and she had to tell the whole team why she was sitting out. Coach Kress always put her integrity before success on the court, and that's why she's been such a successful coach. She's always been my second mother, and is a big reason I am the person I am today. That was another one of God's plans. Actually, Coach Kress was mistaken for my mother a couple times when we were on trips, even though she's only about 13 or 14 years older to me. One time I remember at a hotel we were getting our rooms, and the receptionist asked me a question. I said, yes, ma'am, and she looked at Coach Kress and said, man, your son is very polite. And Coach Kress looked at me and glared and said, yes, I raised him well. One thing also, Coach Kress, that I joke with her about is her favorite food to give her kids for breakfast is raw cookie dough. So that's one thing that we do not do at our house. That's one thing I did not learn from her. And the last thing about Coach Kress is she's probably the most competitive person, which is saying a lot because I think I am too sometimes. But she has competitions with her car to see if, when it gets close to empty, if she can make it to the place she's going without running out of gas. Okay, which I think is totally ridiculous. We've argued about that many times. I learned a lot, but God still wasn't the center of my life. There were some ups and downs over the next few years. One down was Grandma Ruby passed away. She was supposed to come visit and watch me play a game, but passed away about 5 days before they came out. Excuse me. My grandpa and parents still came out, and we definitely missed her. I decided to stay the night with Grandpa in his hotel room. He has trouble sleeping, and he was up a lot through the night. And I'll tell you what, you probably don't realize how loud a Hershey Kiss wrapper is at 3 a.m., but it is super loud. But I don't blame him at all. It was a hard time for everybody. I wanted to come back home with them to take care of my mom, but I knew Grandma would have kicked my butt. She wouldn't have wanted me to change my plans and take time away from college for her. She would have wanted no part of that, so my family and I decided I should stay and go to class. And up was meeting another amazing person, Shep. He was Coach Kress's high school coach and came down to Jewel to coach with us. I'd heard horror stories about him from Coach Kress because he was very, very old school coach. But she said I would get along with him. And I was like, he's in his 60s and I'm in my 20s. What am I going to have in common with this guy? But boy, was she right. He was awesome. We hung out all the time. He came out to bars with me and my college friends, and he fit in perfectly with us. But his wife was still in Vinton, so he only stayed for 2 years. And he was so down to earth and easygoing, but he knew exactly how to push Coach Kress's buttons. I remember one time I was recruiting, and Coach Kress had a family thing, and so he was in charge of practice. And the next day he was doing an individual workout with a girl, and we asked him how practice went. And he said, it went fine, but I changed one of the plays. And Coach Kress said, you what? And I changed one of the plays. He said, no, you didn't. Yeah, I didn't like it, so I changed it. And so she stormed off, just super mad. And I looked at him, and he smiled and I said, what'd you change? He said, you know how that girl sits at the screen like this? I just moved her like this. And so I just started cracking up. And he said, I knew that'd get to her. And another time was, we were all in her office, and she was working on something, and we got bored. We had stopwatches, and a game we liked to play was to see how fast we could start and stop the stopwatch and see who could be the best at it. So we did it, but it sounds like beep, 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 beep. Beep, beep, beep. And about 5 minutes later, she turns around and starts screaming at us, get out of my office, I don't want to hear you about it. And so she stormed out, and I looked at Shep, and he winked at me and said, I knew that'd get her. And now having kids, 15 years later, I know the feeling of that all too well. Jewel always holds a special place in my heart. I still go back and visit campus every summer, and the friends I made there are more like family. I had one teammate who ended up being the best man at my wedding. He was a year younger than me, and we were introduced on his visit when I was a freshman. His name was Ben Thomason. We quickly realized that we had a lot in common, not just our last names. He wanted to be a teacher and a coach, which he is in Lee's Summit, Missouri. Cameron Gall was another teammate that I considered more like a brother. He would drop everything to help someone out. Back then, our future families were the last thing on our minds, but they were both great roommates, and we sure needed each other's help to get through college. We all have families now, and our friendship means that much more. It's fun to see our kids playing together, but we are a little worried that they might turn out like we did. Now, I was living on $2,000 a year, trying to survive on money from my summer job, but it was a struggle. I tried finding a teaching job in Missouri, but there were 4 schools shut down by the state, so all those teachers were trying to find jobs too. The first question I was asked was, how much experience did I have? And the answer was 0. I was a long-term sub at 2 schools, along with a student teaching at another, but those didn't count to administration. At this same time, my life came into an all-time low. I was going to church, but not regularly, and wasn't keeping God at the center of my life. I started dating 2 girls at once without them knowing, and I felt like I was letting a lot of people down. There was a hole in my life, and I was filling it with everything I could find besides God. But he once again helped. Coach Kress introduced me to Brownie. He was the Kansas City Royals chaplain and did some things with our basketball team as well. We started doing weekly Bible studies, and he got me involved with activities in his church. Slow pitch softball and coaching youth soccer. It changed my life. I was serving God and doing things I loved at the same time, but God wasn't done with me yet. Now, along with applying in Missouri, I told Shep to keep an eye out for job opportunities around him in Iowa. The plan was to teach and coach with him at his new job, West Delaware High School. So I made a point that I would call him on a Sunday. And when I called, he didn't answer, which is unlike Shep. And so about 15 minutes later, he called me back and said, hey man, I totally forgot that I was supposed to look for jobs for you, but I went to the gas station and grabbed the last newspaper, and I found a job. It was a teaching job and coaching job at Beckman Catholic High School. That's not where I thought it would get me touched up. Obviously, that was God again, intervening in my life. I had a phone interview with Mr. Mead and Mr. Troutman. Mr. Mead said he didn't want to waste any of our time by having me drive 5.5 hours if we weren't both interested. I got a call about 15 minutes after hanging out with Mr. Mead, and it was Coach Kress, and she was super pumped to tell me, hey, they want you really bad. Just after that, Mead called back and asked me to come in for a formal interview. When I came home, I toured the school, and when I came here, I toured the school, and Mr. Mead was saying, this is your classroom, and this is where you'll practice, and that kind of stuff. So I could foresee that I was going to get the job. Now, funny story that nobody really knows about the offer that I got, but since most of us have adult beverages in front of us, my college friends and I, when we were hanging out, decided that we wanted to create a day of fun called Beer Olympics. And so it was a day of drinking games and stuff like that. And we stayed at my buddy's dairy farm, and nobody drove. We stayed there. It was good fun. About halfway through the day, I went check my phone, and I had a voicemail from Pat Mead. And on the voicemail, it said that I was offered the job, and I did not answer or call back that day. I was smarter than that. I waited a couple days and accepted then. Now, there is one thing that Mr. Mead and Mr. Troutman didn't tell me. After I accepted the job, I got a call from the Dyersville commercial. They interviewed me and asked what I thought about taking over a program that had only won 2 games the previous year, or the previous 2 years. Now, both Mead and Troutman told me that they had won only 2 games the previous year, but no one mentioned to tell me the team went 0-22 the year before. So I still tell Troutman that he tricked me into this job. But I knew it was going to be an uphill battle from the start. So I moved up here in the summer to start open gyms and get acclimated to the area. And the first person I met in Dyersville was Jill Ray. She invited me to the 4th of July party right after I moved up here. We have been close ever since. She is the perfect example of sacrifice. I need a break again. Am I just supposed to hold it? She's been my assistant for the last 11 years, and I can't imagine coaching without her. She's a Delaware County Sheriff's deputy, and her first 8 years with me, she was working nights. There was times that if we had a tournament, all-day tournament in the summer, or the 6-game marathon with Cascade, she wouldn't sleep after work. She would come straight from work to basketball, then work to after. And the dummy that I am would mention how tired I was. She never once complained and never missed anything. The sacrifice she makes for our program is amazing. She's also the godmother of Thea, our third. I got that right this time, right? Because I said Finn at one point. Now, I'm guessing Thea didn't realize how good of a friend Jill was, because it took her about 1.5 years to let Jill anywhere near her. There's a picture on Jill's phone of Jill holding her for the first time, and she's screaming bloody murder. And also, not this summer, but the summer before, I usually bring one kid with me to open gym. Thea wasn't walking yet. So she would sit, you could sit her down, she wouldn't go anywhere. So you'd sit her and we put a ball in between her legs, and she'd just sit and watch open gym. Well, Jill kept going over, and when she touched the ball, Thea would scream, and then nothing, scream, nothing, scream, nothing. So I don't think she realized how close we were. But now she's good. She let her hold you a couple weeks ago. Thea let her hold her, at least for a little bit. Now this reminds me of another motivational speech that I give the basketball team. I got this from Shep, a person I already mentioned. The speech is about pigs. Now, I know you're probably thinking, pigs, how are they motivational, and what do they have to do with faith? Now, this motivation relates a lot better to the clientele in Iowa than it did to the city folk in Kansas City. But think of a farm, and think of the animals on the farm. A chicken can give us eggs, a cow can give us milk, but a pig can only give us meat, and my particular favorite is bacon. So a pig sacrifices everything for us to have meat. And so when we tell this to the girls, we say, go out there and be pigs today. Be a pig for your teammates. Sacrifice anything it takes to win this game tonight. And so for the rest of the year, they're usually talking about being pigs. And they'll have, if you ever see anybody with a pig on their backpack, that's what it's talking about. Jill is a perfect example of sacrifice, just like the pig. But let's get back on track. As August rolled around, I had butterflies in my stomach for my first real teaching job, but was also super excited to get started. It was great to meet a lot of the teachers on the first day as we were getting ready for the basics for the upcoming school year. But one teacher really made a big impression on me, the junior high English teacher, Emmy Brim. She was also in charge of the library resources, so I kept asking for projectors, fans, anything that she might have. We sat next to her at a volleyball game, and of course the students were ruthless the next day, telling us we were dating, we were married, we were going to spit out a bunch of kids, et cetera, et cetera. So when I finally asked her out, I said something like, hey, sorry the students stole my thunder, but would you like to go out with me? And thank the Lord, she said yes. Obviously, fast forward 4 years, we got married. She's the ideal person, wife, and mother. I can't even start to explain what she has meant to me. She taught me all about responsibility, generosity, reliability, and her faith has no bounds. I'm now starting to see those traits in my kids, which is amazing. My wife is a pretty great coach, too. While she was coaching speech at Beckman, she was constantly sending teams to state, which she loves to remind me about, that she made it to state and I haven't yet. And I couldn't marry into a better family either, all million of them, because she's one of 9. They've accepted me from the very first day, except for when we play games at their house. Then the goal is to beat me every time. Getting the job at Beckman is probably the best thing that God ever did to me. Obviously, it helped me introduce to the love of my life. There are other benefits also. As I stated earlier, I was a teacher or a long-term sub at 3 other schools. 2 inner-city schools in Kansas City, William Chrisman, and Southwest Early College campus. Now, Chrisman introduced me to my first fight. I was teaching an algebra class for kids that had already failed algebra at least once. A girl got a text message on her phone, and I could see that she was very mad after the text message. And so she asked to go to the bathroom, and I said, "Are you really going to the bathroom?" And she said, "Yes." And so I said, "Okay," but I kind of followed her out in the hallway, and she walked about halfway to the bathroom and then sprinted in another room and just started beating somebody else up. And so I went in there and pulled her off, and that was the first fight I ever broke up. Actually, the only fight I've ever broke up. Southwest Early College campus, we called SWEC, was the real deal inner city school. You had to go through metal detectors to get to class. You had to drop your keys and everything in the little basket like at the airport to slide through the rollers, and it had cops 24/7. And the year I kept in touch with one of the teachers I met, a year after I left, they had over 90 fires set in one of the bathrooms in the school. But the feeling I got teaching those kids geometry and the way that they bought in was just life-changing. It was awesome. The last Catholic school I was at was in St. Joseph, Missouri. It was a Catholic school called Bishop LeBlond High School. I got that long-term sub job because we had camp with some of their players, and they told their principal about me after their teacher had gotten cancer. I was there for probably 4 months, which was pretty cool. LeBlond only had mass once a month, so it didn't feel super Catholic to me. But the first mass was something else. I was nervous for every aspect. Do I genuflect? Where do I sit down? And like a speaker we had last week at Beckman said, I wasn't prepared for the calisthenics of mass. Stand up, sit down, kneel, stand, sit down, kneel, stand. And I also laughed out loud when the bell was rung, when the gifts were presented by the priest. I thought it was a joke. The difference between the church I went to and Catholic Mass was huge. I felt it was a lot more structured and a lot less camaraderie. But little did I know that God was preparing me for Beckman. I could tell the difference in Beckman from my first visit. After I accepted the job, Mr. Mead invited me to meet with the returning girls. We were sitting in the auditorium, and he was going over my background. I still remember to this day, Jenna Lansing, her mom was here earlier, but she must not be. Jenna Lansing said, "God, this is going to suck, isn't it?" Everyone was so kind and welcoming from the first day. The weekly mass and hourly prayer makes a huge difference, especially in the intentions before the prayers. I put some people on that list, and the amount of prayers that are going out is huge. As a whole, the kids are genuine and kind. I've also had the privilege of being a speaker at Kairos. It's a retreat for juniors, and it was a life-changing experience. The talk I'm giving today is actually a mix of 2 talks I gave there. It's actually why Casey asked me to give the talk today. At least that's what she said. The testimonials and talks from the seniors and the transformation the juniors go through over the weekend is amazing. Just another chance to get to know students outside of the geometry classroom. And I'll tell you what, our students are pretty amazing. One funny story I remember is one night, everyone has to stay quiet. Nobody's allowed to talk. Emmy and I were both at Kairos, and she was about 4 months pregnant. She had a glass of water, and she spilled it, and then I picked up the cup and threw it away. Well, girls came around the corner and saw a puddle underneath her, so they thought her water broke. And so them trying to explain how her water broke, pantomiming was pretty hilarious, and then she's going. So that was pretty funny. Of course, coaching basketball has been a blessing also. I've gotten to know a lot of great people along the way, other coaches on my staff, but the players are what makes it worthwhile. I love having them come back and reminisce, telling old stories and telling me what they're up to now. That's the best. I actually have a former player on my coaching staff, and that's awesome. Another huge plus is getting invited to my former players' weddings. It is always good to be included in the list of wedding invites. It does remind me that I'm getting old, but I know that's a blessing from God. Beckman also introduced me to one of my best friends, Father Dole. He is one of the most thoughtful and humble people I've ever met. We always go to every new Star Wars movie that comes out. We have been to the last 4, and I'm not sure what to do now that he's in Rome. He has a great relationship with my kids. I remember him talking with Ruby when she was around too about Master Yoda being a good guy and Darth Vader being a bad guy. Now, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but Father Dole compares himself to a Jedi. If you aren't familiar with Star Wars, those are the dudes that are holding the laser swords. They're usually extremely wise, and one sacrifice a Jedi has to make is a life of celibacy. So one time before Mass at Beckman, I told Father Dole, "May the Force be with you." And on the spot, he said, "Oh, I should add that to my homily." And 15 minutes later, he did just that. And I knew that peace was for me, and he was including me in the Mass. I honestly never thought I would get to know his priest as well as I know him. God is truly amazing, and my journey is proof of that. Whether it's having Trey coming to Oregon for 1 year, Shep finding the last paper in the Vinton-Shellsburg gas station, or just introducing me to the people I've met along the way. I've been truly blessed and continue to be, as now I have 4 wonderful, well, mostly wonderful kids that make my life entertaining, to say the least. To be able to watch them grow in their own faith, whether it's Ruby, who is 6, sharing something she learned about Jesus at school, trying to get Finn, our 4-year-old, to pay attention at Mass on Sundays, or teaching Thea, age 2, the prayers that we do at the end of each day before bed. I'm interested to see what new facet of life Abel, who was born a month ago, brings, but I'll tell you right now, it isn't sleep. There are differences in what I believe in the Catholic faith. The biggest is communion. Where I went to church, we only had communion on holidays, Christmas and Easter. Obviously, that is a little different in Catholicism. Sometimes homilies aren't very accepting of other faiths, and that is hard to hear. My wife and I have agreed to raise our children as Catholics and always sit in the front of the pews during Mass. I try to live my life the best I can, using examples that God has put in front of me, but when I'm told that the only path to heaven is through communion and Catholicism, it's hard to hear. I know God has made me the person I am today, and I'm where He wanted me to be, so in my heart, I'm where I need to be. My life is constantly evolving, and my faith is doing so as well. I know God will continue to bless and introduce me to new people, and I am looking forward to that. When I think back to the skinny kid playing basketball at lunch to where I am now as a coach and a teacher, it's amazing how everything has a link to parenting. Man, it is hard. I feel like my main focus in life is trying to raise my kids. I feel like I'm constantly trying to correct them or push them in the right direction. I can see the correlation between God being my father and trying to lead me in the right path. I can see the correlation. Oh, I just said that. Man, has to be frustrating for him. I get tired of reminding Ruby to grab her mask for the bus, or Finn to stop running around the house naked at bath time, or Thea to stop slapping her older brother in the face, which is a true story. He got in trouble, so we sat him against the wall, and then 2 minutes later, Thea came strolling up, the 2-year-old, and just reared back and slapped him in the face. And I was trying she was trying to...
I was perfectly calm.
She was calm. She was calm, and I had a pillow on my face cracking up because Finn was just like, oh my, she just hit me, I didn't even do anything. Sorry, it was funny. But of course, I can see the unconditional love I have for my kids, and I know God feels the same way about me and all of you. As I said before, one lesson I've learned in my life from God is that there will be difficult times, but that means you are probably headed in the right direction, and God is there to lead you. Thanks again for the invitation to speak today, and thank you for all for listening to me ramble for so long. Is there anything that I touched on that anybody wants to know more about? I have a lot more stories, but I thought I only had a limited time to talk, but I think I talked way faster than I was supposed to. So anybody have any questions or anything that they want me to elaborate on? All right, I guess you guys all get it. Oh, Mr. Digmann.
Is Shep still coaching?
Shep retired 6 years ago. 6 years ago. He was, I think 700 wins he had. He won a state championship in 6-girl basketball. And then about 3 years later, when they switched to 5-on-5, he won another state championship at Vinton. I think he has 3. But stories that Coach Kress told me was he was very old school. And when he was at Jewel, I don't think I ever heard him raise his, I think one time in 2 years he raised his voice. He was just like, I don't know, the crazy grandpa that was there. Because some of the stuff they had the girls do. I know his first day, we had morning workouts, and he was telling our girls to do entry passes underhand, like rolled into them. And our starting point guard, who was an All-American, looked at me and was like, "Is he for real?" I was like, "Yeah, he's for real." But he was awesome. He was like a grandpa, and he used to make me omelets every Saturday when we used to watch game film, and he was awesome. So, any other questions? Anything? Mom, do you have any other questions? So, being the teacher I am, I guess you all guys get out of class early today, and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.